All right. Well, hello and welcome to the DSM Forward series. The series is presented by the Greater Des Moines Partnership and is part of the DSM Forward initiative. Our goal is to help business leaders connect, share, and exchange information and resources related to moving forward in this next phase of reopening. The partnership has published a series of playbooks, business playbooks, FAQs, and other resources available to you on dsmpartnership.com/DSM Forward. I hope those resources, in addition to the Ask the Expert series, will be helpful to you. So today, I am joined by Jeff Chelsvig, President and CEO of Des Moines Performing Arts, and Chris Conley, GM at Iowa Event Center. Before we begin, if I could ask everybody just from a logistics standpoint, go ahead and mute your microphones.
Mike, you muted yourself.
Oops, sorry. We're going to use the chat room today. I hit it, didn't I? We're going to use the chat room today for everybody to share their questions. I'll kind of kick it off to begin, but feel free to start typing in any questions you have for Chris and for Jeff. So with that, I think I will stop the screen share. And Chris, let's start with you. Maybe you just give us an overview of kind of where things stand for you. I know we're going to get into more detail here in a little bit, but can you just give us an overview of where things stand for the Iowa Event Center?
Yeah, sure. Mike, thanks, and good afternoon. As most know, the Iowa Event Center has been shut down since March 13th, and we're just starting to come back online now. So we're looking forward to it. We've been extensively putting together a playbook back. Hey, Mike, I'm having some technical issues. Let me just see if I can. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, doing good.
Let's try that. Sorry about that. So like some others, we've been shut down since March 13th or so. Our public offices have been closed. Just recently, we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel with what the governor has eased restrictions. And we're actually just getting ready to host our first event back in the convention center this weekend, June 19, 20, and 21. So really excited about that. There's still a lot of steps that we've been working on that we're putting in place for this week. And I can get into more details later, but it's been a long road. It's been a couple months there where we went into the phase where events were canceling, we're postponing, we're rescheduling some of those events. Really, probably the first 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of unknowns out there. So kind of working through a lot of that and then just really taking things day by day, like a lot of others, just hoping to come back online. And, like I said, in the last week or two, we're starting to come back online with some events that we know that we're going to put on and execute in the next couple months.
All right. Jeff, if I could turn to you now, I'd love to have the same for you, but I think that I would ask you one additional thing, and I'm a season ticket holder at the theater. Tell us about what's going on, not just here in Des Moines, but with Broadway and Broadway theater.
Sure, Mike. Well, let's start with Broadway in New York. Broadway in New York still doesn't really have a start time yet. There are some dates that kind of get floated out there in the media in terms of no events until after such and such a date, and oftentimes that is really about the refunding of tickets that had been purchased prior to those dates. So it's a big question. Obviously, in New York City is in a very different situation where they have a very deliberate plan in terms of phasing in different activities, and they have just begun phase 1, which is reopening of certain businesses and a number of different things that have kind of low risk attached to them. Theater is going to be in phase 4. Which could be a long ways down the road. Nobody really knows at this point in time, but certainly on Broadway, dealing with the touring shows and the Broadway shows, the unions are weighing in right now, starting to weigh in more in terms of the protocols that they want to see for their members, both in New York and on the road. So all of that kind of trickles down to us. We are not like the Iowa Event Center. We don't really have any space that we use for meetings and conventions and banquets. We do have Coles Commons, our outdoor space, which has events scheduled for the summer and fall. But like Chris, we shut down actually on March 16th, technically. We were supposed to open an 8-performance run of My Fair Lady as part of the Willis Broadway series on March 17th. That did not happen, so that is being rescheduled, as is the Band's Visit, which is the last show in our current season of the Willis Broadway series. We have canceled 2 events in the Willis Broadway series for this season. Wicked, which was actually ironically supposed to open this week for a 3-week run. And that was tough because this was the first play of Wicked in a number of years. There's only one touring production of that. And so the tour is closed for now. They are hoping to reopen in the fall. And then the Book of Mormon was scheduled to play here in July for a week. That tour has closed permanently. That was part of a plan. The tour was going to close not too long after our engagement. This was going to be our 4th or 5th engagement. Right. So we can get into this a little bit more later, but we are doing some things virtually. We're doing camps. We're doing a lot of outreach to our donors and our season ticket holders, trying to keep them engaged. But the building is silent for now.
Yeah, I understand. I would imagine, just to kind of keep going on with that, with the touring companies, once they even delay them for a while, you're not guaranteed to get all those actors back necessarily, I would think. Or maybe I'm wrong about that, but doesn't it add additional logistics of bringing the team back together, if you will, or the crew and performers?
I think that's probably valid. I think, again, my thinking is that if the show has been on the road, then the cast is probably going to stay in place. There really aren't another up. Most of the time, the reason they leave is for another show. There aren't that many other shows going out. The bigger challenge, I think, for us with Broadway will be the fall shows, the ones that we're supposed to start in the fall. Those are going to be challenged because to get open in the fall, they should be casting and rehearsing approximately now.
Yeah, and I'm going to just touch on one more thing with you. I think for the benefit of people who've not done a lot of live theater, talk a little bit. I was thinking about your event center, but in New York, it's even harder. Those theaters are more compressed. There's less room in some cases. Just the density issues that you're dealing with in live theater, in the audience, on stage, and behind stage. Can you just address what that's like?
Yeah, very simply, Mike, we cannot do social distancing the way that the CDC recommends it. We can't do it on stage. We can't do it off stage. We can't do it in the orchestra pit. We can't do it in the audience. From the audience standpoint, one of the exciting aspects of live theater, and Chris can attest to this both in the case of concerts and pro sporting events, it's really the excitement of being part of that audience that really is an important part of the performance. And that really cannot be achieved by socially distancing in an audience. Also, from an economic standpoint, we simply can't do it with a reduced capacity because right. The cost of a Broadway show, for instance, or a concert, and Chris can attest to this, you just can't do it. All of the numbers are based on having so many thousand people in the audience. And the backstage is tricky because for shows, we have local stagehands and wardrobe people who are interfacing with the touring folks. Our local wardrobe people are often dressing the touring artists. In the orchestra pit, we can probably do a little better social distancing because the orchestras we have a huge orchestra pit. We don't use it, the entire part of it, but that may be the only place where we could really do that. But no, social distancing is a challenge for sure.
Well, you brought up the concert, Chris. Let's go back to you. So I was very much looking forward to going to Elton John this year, and along with My Fair Lady, Jeff. You've both talked about a couple of things. You've got shows that are postponed, and you have shows that have been canceled. And maybe you could just, Chris, talk about first, if you would, the economics of Elton John. And what would it be if you socially distanced it? And then kind of help us with, because I know the questions are all over the place about tickets and refunds and how that works. And maybe you could just take both of those for us.
Yeah, sure. And, as you know, last week would have been a big week for us as we had Journey scheduled on June 10th and then Elton on June 11th. So 2 different shows. Unfortunately for us, Journey went and canceled. So they're not going to reschedule in a short time frame. As far as Elton is concerned, he is going to reschedule a show, and we feel fortunate about that. For us, it was a sold-out show, over 13,000 people, 13,000 paid tickets, and we're just in a wait-and-see period, and it's really dictated by the artist and Elton's camp. He very much wants to finish out his farewell tour, which is extensive. I mean, it's almost over 2.5 years. So we feel really, really confident that he will reschedule here. It really just depends on the date and when this starts to clear and when he'll feel comfortable getting out on the road. Jeff alluded to this. It's not just that Elton's come to Des Moines. It's a big route, and a lot of other dates and cities are factored in, and we're just a piece of that puzzle. So there's a lot that goes into routing a show with an artist. So we're in a wait-and-see approach, and that's okay. We feel confident he's going to come back. And Jeff touched on this a little bit too, we can't social distance or practice social distancing measures with a show like Elton John. We sold 13,000 tickets. His gross ticket sales are well over $1.7 million. For Elton John to even step foot on stage in Des Moines, his artist guarantees over $1 million. So if we were to go ahead and practice the proper social distancing, our capacity would only be about 3,500 in the building. And we just can't make that work. The math does not work on something like that. For us, we're confident that there's a handful of shows and opportunities that we will be able to make work. An example is a PBR that might have 2 performances where we could have crowd sizes in the 3,000 to 4,000 a night, and something like that could work out. But again, as Jeff mentioned, a lot of these major artists, we just can't make the math work. And be able to pay an artist guarantee if we properly social distance. So that's a challenge. What I would say, though, in our industry, the good news, most of these artists want to play the dates. They're in the process of reworking in their schedules. A great example for us was Michael Bublé, who was scheduled to play in the spring. He has already rescheduled to play in February, and we're confident that that show will take place.
All right. And I saw that recently the decision was made also to cancel the Iowa State Fair. And I would think there's similar kinds of issues with trying to have all those people in the grandstand and down below. It's got to be the same kind of issues. You mentioned PBR, professional bull riding. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. I should clarify that. Professional bull riding.
Yeah, thank you. No beer involved. Well, beer involved, but not PBR necessarily. Makes sense. So you're talking about 3,000 or 4,000. That's about the number. Is that about the size of crowd you would have had anyway for that kind of event? Is it that the idea that the monetary side of it works or could work?
Mike, it's real similar. And I think, and even just working with professional bull riding, they get it that it's not going to be your normal tour. And we're going to have to work with them a little bit on how that all works financially. So for us, our hopes, and when we've hosted professional bull riding in the past, usually go Saturday night, Sunday day. On a Saturday night, we'd be anywhere from 6,000 to maybe 7,000 fans in.
Okay.
The Sunday would dip down a little bit. But I think combined, if we sell well, we won't be too far off it. And I think the math can work. So something like PBR, we're optimistic about.
Yeah. Jeff, going back to you, I mean, I think about artists that don't necessarily fill a theater. There's a second level of artists that comes through. I know I was in your show with Paul Simon. You've certainly filled the place. But so for more of a concert style where there's maybe only a few performers on stage and a few back, is there a chance we'll be seeing something later this year or early next year for what I would say a limited audience engagement? Do you think that's even possible?
We haven't really thought about that, Mike. Again, most of the artists that we deal with, and whether they're, especially at the Civic Center, they are, as Chris said, they are, the guarantees are higher. One of the things to remember about the live performance, it used to be years ago that The reason that artists toured was to sell albums. Now artists tour to make money. That's really their primary source of revenue. And so we really have not gone down that path. We are probably going to look at it at some point, but again, the general consensus is that for venues like ours, you'd be looking at about 20 to 30% of the capacity as being the max. And that ends up being, as Chris said, it's about 600 seats or so. And financially, then you can't say, well, we're going to charge $250 for this artist that, a year ago would have been $60. So it's really a tough thing. We may try to do some things on Coles Commons. We may try to do some things in the Temple Theater, which is our small space at the Temple for Performing Arts. But, the costs end up being about the same from both the front of house and back of house costs and advertising. And so it's really a challenge. And it's something that I don't know that I would want to go to a concert and be sitting, 6 feet away from the person I'm attending with as well. So,
well, and I think that's a lot of it. I mean, as a season ticket holder, Beth and I have talked about this, you're elbow to elbow. Right.
Yeah.
And you'd love to have more seats in that theater. I get it. It's the economics of what it takes to seat everyone. And, there's a lot of concern with that and just getting in and out of the theater, walking in front of everyone. Even if I had 6 feet on each side and in front and back, which would be impossible, you still got to get in and out of there. So I don't think it's just the seating. It's all the logistics of getting everyone in, getting everyone out safely. We had a comment from Sam Carroll. He says our experience has been pretty much the same as being described for concerts at the Larsden Amphitheater in Waterworks Park. Says although the outdoor setting is giving us hope that some of those mid-sized concerts might take place with the proper social distancing. So again, going back to Coles Commons and the idea that at least if you're outdoors and you have more opportunity to social distance. So that makes sense. Chris, going back to you, can you talk a little bit about Iowa Wild and the Iowa Wolves and what's going on there?
Yeah, no, I can. And, again, there's a different development just about every day of the week. So from my perspective, we're really keeping a close eye as to what's going to happen with the NBA and NHL. As most have seen, it looks like the NBA and the NHL are going to continue on with their 2019-2020 season. So they're going to try and get their playoffs in, and in the NBA's case, a handful of regular season games, which it looks like they're going to start at the end of July. And from what we're seeing, the NBA Finals could go as late as the second week of October. So obviously, we're working closely with our tenant teams and the Wild and the Wolves, and it really looks like the way things are kind of playing out, we're hopeful to get our full seasons in. It just looks like both seasons will be delayed in starting, in that the Wild usually kick off in early October. It looks like now they potentially start in maybe early to mid-December. And the Wolves, same kind of situation where they normally tip off in early November. And again, they're potentially looking at a December start, which for us, it wouldn't be the worst case. We have latitude and at least flexibility towards the end of our year. Our fiscal year goes July 1 through the end of June. So where both seasons, the Wolves usually end the regular season at the end of March. The Wild would end in mid-April. They would both look to extend into May and June. And once we get to May and June, we do have a lot more flexibility. So as far as I'm concerned, it looks like it is going to be delayed, but I'm very, very hopeful that both teams, even though their starts of their season would be delayed, I think we'll get the full regular season in. And to be honest with you, that's what matters most to us.
Yeah. You mentioned, Chris, you've got an event coming up this weekend. Can you talk a little bit about what it is and the capacity restrictions? Kind of what are you having to do for this event?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Mike. And what's funny is that it's a dance competition. So it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And one of the reasons why I think we're going to be able to come back online a lot sooner in the convention center is we have so much space. And some of those folks that have booked with us that have canceled or moved, their dates, it really gives us the whole complex to be able to fit an event in. So as far as the dance competition goes, we have all of Hy-Vee Hall. We're doing some stuff virtually with that competition we wouldn't normally do. So we feel confident that we'll be able to apply the social distancing, be able to get the event in. There won't be as many spectators as normal, really just close family. The dance groups will come in, perform, and then out. So instead of just kind of hanging around all day, that won't happen, and it'll be a different kind of an event. But we're just thrilled to be able to host it. And for us, we're actually going to end up hosting our first event to the public before we actually open our offices back up. We just feel like we're at a point right now where we don't need a lot of those folks that are working remotely now to come in and put this event on. So for us, it's really safety of our employees. And as we establish our guidelines in the offices, and there's some things we need to do to be able to apply the social distancing, we're probably looking at more like a mid-July to where we open the offices back up. And I'll tell you on my end, and Jeff can probably talk about this too, but I feel so good about how my staff has been able to be efficient from remote. They don't have to be on site, and we've been able to accomplish a lot. And I'll tell you, just because we haven't been hosting events doesn't mean we haven't been busy. So it's been a different kind of busy, but my staff has done a really, really good job working remotely. But yeah, I mean, we'll host our first event this weekend and then hope to bring our staff back on in the office in mid-July.
Jeff, if I can, I know it's a harder question for you, but what do you see as, so let's start with Nolan Plaza. When do you, from a time frame standpoint, when do you think something could happen out there that's a, kind of a public event that people could buy tickets to and come to?
At Coles Commons, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Coles Commons, sorry.
Well, a lot of the stuff that we do in Coles Commons, we do a fair amount of rental business there where we're renting to users. Wine Fest is a great example. They have delayed that, but I don't have the calendar committed, Mike, as I've been working on other stuff, and I don't usually deal with that. But typically some of the things that we do on Coles Commons are not ticketed, or they are private events that are rental events. I mentioned earlier, we're doing something right now. We're in the midst of this is I think our second or third week. I think it's second week of camps. We're doing camps all virtually this year. Yeah. This is brand new for us, and our education team did an amazing job of doing a quick change from live camps to virtual camps. So we have instructors not only locally, but also in New York City that are working with kids right now. And so far, so good. It's a very different experience. But it's something that we offered. We had signed up a lot of kids for camp already, had them ready to go. And so we had to kind of do a quick change for the families, gave them multiple options of things that they could do, a little more a la carte than what we've done in the past. And again, our team has done a terrific job with that. Echoing what Chris said, our team is working remotely. We do have people that are coming into the office occasionally. I come to the office once or twice a week. Our ticket office is exceptionally busy because right now we're processing or getting ready to process the refunds of the Wicked sales. And something I wanted to mention is that when you buy a ticket at our venue, and I know this is true also at Chris's, that money essentially is going into escrow. We are keeping it separate. We don't use it for operations. We don't use it until the event actually happens. So we are able then to refund those tickets if an event cancels, which we've had to do now 3 times this year so far with Wicked, the Book of Mormon, and also one of our offerings in the 2021 Willis Broadway series, Disney's Aida. The tour is not going to happen, and so we've refunded our subscribers that money already. So everybody is working remotely. I like Chris, we're not sure when we're going to be reopening the office because it's somewhat predicated upon when we might start doing events. And like Chris said, a lot of our staff isn't necessarily needed at the office and have gotten really good at doing things remotely. And so we'll see how that plays out in the future. Our staff expanded quite a bit in the last few years, and we were constantly looking for space in the office. If we can have some people working remotely, that might relieve some of that pressure.
Sure. Well, we've got a question that came in from one of our attendees, and the question is, do you think once vaccines are available and being produced, Is that when we'll go back to full capacity, or do you have other thoughts about when we, I hate to say go back to the way it was, because I don't know it'll ever be quite the way it was, but get back to being able to utilize the full capacity of your facilities?
Well, certainly vaccines will be one of the things that can happen, and would probably be the best solution. Again, given that the interaction with the audience, both from the attendee and the performers, thing, we do want people to be, as you said, Mike, elbow to elbow. That is important. But we are also, I think, cognizant that it is about when people are going to feel comfortable doing that. And there will be some people that are comfortable and some that are not. And so trying to kind of gauge that and take gauge that in our society right now, it's very hard, because certain things are opening, and just because you're allowed to open doesn't mean that you are opening. And so that's one of the things that we've been very careful in saying with our state government is, even if we are allowed to do it, we may not be until we know that it's safe for our team members, safe for the audience, safe for the performers, safe for everybody.
Yeah, and I would just say I totally agree with Jeff in that. I mean, obviously the vaccine would be huge, and you ask that question now, and you look at it, and we're talking about, at least in my facility, a Wild game, a Wolves game. In all likelihood, there's not going to be a vaccine come December, maybe even January. And, our hopes are that, especially in minor leagues, and the same thing goes for San Burnaby at Principal Park, minor league sports, we can't exist without fans. The model doesn't work. And, there's no TV money. There's no other revenue that comes in without the fans. You lose sponsorship, you lose parking, you lose concessions. So, Mike, I would say the same as Jeff. It's going to take for people to feel comfortable, and it may not be a vaccine. It may be a treatment that if somebody gets this thing, they know they're going to get better over a certain period of time, and we can physically treat it. But we're hopeful because, again, with a vaccine being fast-tracked, you're probably not going to get that in this year, in 2020. And we're hopeful to get back to closer to normal business before the end of this year. And I think that would have to happen without a vaccine, but potentially there is some treatment to help with this thing if you are positive with COVID. But time will tell. We're taking it one day at a time. And just like Jeff, fortunately for us, we have space where we can at least get some activity back in the facility. But at the end of the day, the big events that really drive revenue and make us profitable are the concerts, are the state tournaments, are our tenants. And short of having a vaccine, I don't know how you get back to the normal that we're used to.
Jeff, there's a question here for you. It says, is there a best practice for the performers in the pit orchestra, for instance?
Well, I'm sure that the American Federation of Musicians is working on that right now, but the only thing I can tell you is there is one show that has continued to play throughout this crisis, worldwide professional show that I know of, and that is a touring production of the Phantom of the Opera that is in South Korea. They never really shut down. They shut down for a very brief amount of time, but South Korea has dealt with coronaviruses for many years and know how to do that. I was on a Zoom call with a representative of Andrew Lloyd Webber's company that's the producer of the tour. And what I learned was that in the orchestra, the string players are wearing masks. Of course, the reed and brass players cannot, because they just can't. And so that to me is the only best practice that I know of right now. But I know that for those shows and the touring shows that we have utilize musicians, both local and touring, that are members of the AFM, which is a union. And so there will be protocols for sure.
Chris, you mentioned Michael Bublé in the spring. Is that kind of I think you mentioned February. Is that kind of your first thought on when you'll first see a concert back in the arena?
Mike, it's such a moving target. I'll tell you that we had a handful of shows that postponed early on. Jeff Dunham's a good example. Jeff Dunham was scheduled to play, Wells Fargo Arena in early April, and he moved for the first time to July 31st. So that shows you how things change so quickly that they felt comfortable that by the end of July that we'd be able to host a show of that nature. And he has since moved again, to October. So on a smaller scale, not quite the same thing as a touring musician, we do have a Jeff Dunham and a Joe Rogan scheduled in the month of October in Wells. And I'll tell you, as things sit today, we feel confident. Production is way lower than a normal concert. The stuff that needs to get brought in, the amount of labor that needs to put it together. So we're confident in that. And, as I look at my calendar, is specifically the arena. Convention Center, I think, again, we're going to get up and running and do a lot more. But on the arena side, there's some things that we're working on now. We're looking at potentially hosting a commencement, university commencement in Wells in August. And we've already done some layouts, and I think that's going to work out. And again, that's positive. It's trending in the right direction. So I think that can work. And then we talked about professional bull riding. They're looking at mid-September. I think that's something that can come online. And then when you talk about a touring act, then you get the Jeff Dunham and Joe Rogan in October. And, you ask me now, we're confident, but that could very well move again. So it's kind of like a moving target. And I think, when Michael Bublé rescheduled, they felt really good that, all right, well, we get past 2020 and into 21. And, you're starting to get out of the winter time frame, and if there is a secondary spike, that they'll be okay. But again, it's just a guess at this point. We're hopeful. We really are hopeful. As far as concerts go and touring acts go, I don't see us hosting another concert in Wells Fargo Arena in 2020. I see it being possible to do a comedian. I don't see a touring act happening. And right now, the way we're scheduled is Bublé would be the first big touring act to hit, and that would be February of 21. And again, I'd say we're hopeful, but as everybody knows, there's no guarantees at this point.
Jeff, similar for you, or I know I'm asking you to look in a crystal ball, but maybe you can say what we're sure is not going to happen.
Well, we've announced the things that we know are not happening. We still have events on the calendar for the fall, but we're evaluating those every day. Not only our own events, but we have users like the Des Moines Symphony in the Civic Center. We also have 3 local theater companies that work in our Stoner Theater at the Civic Center. So we're in constant discussion with them about the feasibility of these kind of things. But touching on something that Chris said earlier, part of the puzzle also is that these acts play for either a night and move on, or play for a week and move on. And if they come into a situation where there is a roadblock because of illness, or there is an outbreak, or the theater is closed in the previous week before ours, that can just throw everything into havoc. And it's going to be because of the way that the reopening is really in the hands of the states, they are going to be very different. And so we don't, I think that's one of the things that's going to be tough. Chris and I can attest to the fact that we've seen in the popular music scene that a lot of the agencies have really cut back on their roster, not only on their rosters, but cut back on their staff. Because there just isn't the activity right now, and it's hard. So this is really, I think the unfortunate thing is, I know there are a lot of industries that say, well, we were the first to close and last to open. That's really true for us. It really is going to be one of the tough things for us to look in the crystal ball and figure out when we can reopen to the capacities that we need, but it is essential that we do so.
Yeah, I know from a ticketing standpoint, you've been offering, at least I know we were offered the opportunity to either ask for a refund or apply the money in some other way, future donation, whatever. And I think it's a great idea. And I was on a call the other day where we were talking to some medical professionals, and I asked them what else, on closing comments, and they universally said, we would appreciate some grace and the fact that things are changing. And I would say to all the people that are out there listening today is, just listening to you in just this simple 30-minute discussion we've had, the logistics of this are just mind-boggling when you think about, like you said, Jeff, where you're trying to line up city after city after city, and then everybody throws that away and starts again. And then, if it starts to be into the holidays when people don't necessarily want to be on the road during the holidays, I just can't begin to fathom the logistics that have to go on a national scale, whether it's Elton John putting his concert back together or getting Wicked to come back to any of the theaters. Can you go, Jeff, a little farther into, you talked a little bit about some of the virtual schools for the kids. Can you talk a little bit more about what it took to pivot from, come on in and we'll all teach you real time live and we'll, act out together, to we're on Zoom now?
Yeah. Well, one of the primary things that we do is called a musical theater camp, where we bring young people. These are mostly younger people, some grade school, junior high, that they would come together. We would cast the show on Monday, rehearse the show for 3 days, and then perform a musical on Friday. The company that we work with to get those materials did a very quick pivot, if you will, to create a way that this can be done with 20 students at a time. And at the end of the week, each student will contribute a 1-minute snippet that will then be edited together to form the story arc. And so this is our first week of doing that camp. We'll find out how it works on Friday, but our team seems very enthused about it. And I just saw something on our internal communication about a little video of one of the casting pieces that they were doing today. With the New York artists, it was simply, a lot of them have been teaching virtually since this began. And we actually saw an uptick in the number of junior high students and middle school students that wanted to be part of what we're calling the Broadway Academy, which is, we have a high school Broadway intensive that it's always very popular, but this middle school one this year was even more popular. And so they are working with dance instructors and music directors in New York City. Again, the technology, Mike, there are other platforms that we're able to tap into that make it a little easier. Some of it's on Zoom, some of it's other platforms. But I leave it up to the creativity of our astounding team to kind of figure out how they had to do it. We are doing all of the stuff is based at the Civic Center so that we have reliable Wi-Fi there so we're not crashing in the middle of these things. But we are also doing some offerings for very young students, and that is a new one for us. So I think what's really exciting about this from my standpoint is a lot of the things that we're learning now, we can probably use in the future. Assuming, even if, regardless of what happens, we may be able to do this into the fall. So it's been fun to see how our team has really had to change almost overnight and have done an amazing job with that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to listen to a lot of different people. We're going through the same thing with the partnership. We're all virtual right now. And I know several of the partnership members are on the call. We were just having an update this morning on, when are we going back to the office and what's the plan? And it's a moving target. And so congratulations for being able to pull off what you have. You both complimented your staffs on how well they've worked remotely. And I think I've heard that across the board. Have there been any areas where you were a little surprised? You're surprised in a positive way there. Is there anything that's been particularly difficult these last 90 days? Maybe Chris, we could start with you. What's really been kind of the toughest thing to deal with from an internal and people and your own teams?
Sure. I would say one of the biggest things for me personally, and a lot of our leadership, is that, we put on events, we entertain folks, people come through our doors, and that's the fun part. It really is, whether it's a concert or a convention or a wild playoff game. And, we have a great team. At the Iowa Event Center, we have 75 full-time people, that put this on between food and beverage and ad sales and venue management and all of it. And I just think it's the camaraderie. Like, you're not around your people. And we've gotten really good on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and the rest of it, and that's great. And listen, I think that's going to help. Jeff mentioned this. I think moving down the road, we'll still be able to do stuff like that. I know for me, it'll probably cut down other travel. Instead of flying somewhere for an hour meeting and coming back, we've become pretty good at this. But I think the biggest thing for me, and it's the disappointing thing, is that we like that interaction, whether it's my staff or our clients or our teams. And, now we're going on a couple months where we don't have that at all. And I just say, at least for me personally, that's the one big void that I miss, and I hope it comes back soon. And I can't tell you how many times during the course of a given week that my staff is asking, hey, when are we opening the office again? They all get it. We want to be safe, and there's not a reason to force it right now. But I think genuinely we have a great staff, and we miss each other, and that's the business we're in. So I'd probably say that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I completely echo what Chris said. I think I miss seeing the staff on a daily basis. We do have staff members that are coming in occasionally for various reasons. Don't stay a long time. We socially distance. But I miss seeing our season ticket holders. I miss seeing our donors, because those at the events are when we really get to interact with those people. I also really kind of miss, part of my job is going out and finding these shows that we're presenting, especially on the Broadway side. And I miss seeing live performances. I will never take going to a live performance for granted ever again, because in the absence of it, it's really hard. I miss seeing the Des Moines Symphony on our stage. I miss seeing stuff at our Temple Theater. I never thought I'd say this, but I miss going to New York and seeing shows. And I have no idea when I'll go back to New York. It may be over a year, and I'm usually there once a month. So that's the part. But I really, coming back to what Chris said, I love the camaraderie of our team. We have amazing team members who care a lot about what we do. We have about 45 full-time people, and not as large as Chris's, but still very close. And just that routine, once you start in the season, generally runs for most of us kind of like the traditional Labor Day to Memorial Day. Once you start in that routine, you're doing something new every week. And that's what I think I miss the most.
We hope to have a lot more questions from our audience. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to put out there? Anything more you'd like to say? Chris, I'll start with you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And I appreciate the opportunity today. I would say that, as tough as the last couple months have been, we're optimistic, at least here at the Iowa Event Center. We're really, even though it's a dance competition, we are so excited to come back online and host a live event. And, I think at the end of the day, we're going to get through this. I agree with Jeff in that I really do miss working on the new opportunities, new touring acts, getting ready for a playoff game. That stuff, that stinks that we don't have that. But we will get it back. I think a lot of the things that we're putting in place now, we will carry on in the future, and it'll make it a lot more safe environment. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, at least for us, when you come to the Iowa Event Center. We want to make it comfortable. If you're comfortable going to a sporting event, the likelihood is you'll come back for something else. And I think some of the measures we're taking now and some of the measures we're putting in place will only enhance that environment. So I think that's good. And the other thing that I would say too is, while we haven't been busy hosting events, at least for me and our team at the Iowa Event Center, we've worked on a lot of different initiatives over the last couple months that I'm pretty proud of. I mean, one is Chilling for Charity ticket campaign, where we're actually selling Wells Fargo Arena tickets that says "Stay at home, be a hero, social distance." And it's just kind of a cool thing that we put together. Our marketing team put it together. We put it out on social media, and we actually had a handful of people saying, "Hey, where can we get that?" So we're selling these tickets on our website for $10, at minimum of $10, and you can donate more, and it's all going to the Polk County Health Department. So after a couple months of this, we raised almost $4,000 by doing this neat little ticket campaign. People can remember it, and they probably will. And it's like, man, we were strong. We got through this. We're all in it together. And that's just something small our team put together. Another initiative, Mike, is we're doing local music Mondays, where we're featuring local bands. A lot of them have performed for our block parties, or they've done a pre-show party for us. And, they're hurting too. just like the bigger acts, they can't tour right now, and they're limited, and they've been limited for a long time. So we've gone out and we start to highlight some of these bands on our social media platforms, really push them out there. We push their merchandise and all that. Every penny counts for them to keep them afloat so they can start touring again. Our food and beverage team, they got creative in that, we came to a screeching halt in the middle of March, and nobody expected that to happen. And we had a ton of food and products still left in inventory. And, over the last couple of months, we put these curbside pickup packages together, really discounted packages to help move product, not really to make money, but were good deals, family type things where, it's $8 for a hot dog and 2 beers or 2 sodas and popcorn and all that kind of stuff. And it's gone over very, very well. So while I'll say we haven't been busy with events, we've been busy with a lot of other initiatives. We're preparing to ramp back up. And I just think at the end of the day, we're going to come back and we're going to get out of this thing. And I think we're going to come back strong. And I think even in Jeff's world too, a lot of people are going to miss Broadway. They're going to miss seeing a concert. They're going to miss this stuff, and they're going to want to come back. And when it comes back, I think it's going to be great.
I agree. Jeff, I do miss live theater like you. And I can't wait till it comes back, but your thoughts?
Well, again, I echo what Chris said. I think we have such a wonderful number of people who support us in a variety of ways, both with season tickets to the 7 different series that we operate. Some of those series may be put on hold this year. We have not come to that conclusion yet, but we are kind of in a holding pattern with some of the series at the Temple Theater and some of the things that we do at the Civic Center. But we are so grateful to those people who are season ticket holders who have hung in there with us. There will be some date changes undoubtedly, and we just hope that you will hang with us and know that we are doing everything that we can to get the shows here as soon as it is possible to do it safely. And I just want to also say, as a not-for-profit, we generate about $3 million a year in support through donations and grants. We anticipate that that's going to drop off. That's happening for a lot of reasons, and it's happening to all sorts of not-for-profit organizations. And so we are grateful to our donors that hang in there with us. We, as you said, Mike, with our Wicked tickets, we did something that we'd not done before, which was to offer that opportunity if you cared to donate to us as a not-for-profit. And we've had a fair number of people that have done that. In fact, we had some donors that stepped up to do a match for that. So we anticipate that will be a nice little windfall for us. Most of the programming that we do at the Civic Center and the Temple Theater requires some level of subsidizing. Broadway and concerts do not. So it is those education and community outreach things that I personally miss the most. But as I said, we're trying to do those virtually, and we will continue to try and connect with our wonderful donors and season ticket holders. So thank you.
Well, thank you both for participating today in this session. We truly appreciate it. And we'll share information on this program on the partnership's website. We've recorded this today, and we'll be making that recording available. And just as a reminder, please check out dsmpartnership.com/DSM Forward for other resources, as mentioned earlier. Jeff, Chris, thank you both. And with that, we'll bring this to an end.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.